Okay, so I'm making this video in case if anybody has imported the horror fuse characters and the prefabs are not working in Unity. Somebody has already mentioned that they didn't work for them, so I'm just going to show you how to set the characters up without using the prefabs. So I'm actually in a new scene, an entirely new project in fact, just so that I can explain how this works. You'll obviously be in the flooded ground scene. So if you go into the characters folder, we've got all of our characters, but you may notice when I click on them, they're actually transparent. The reason why this happens, whenever you import characters from Mixamo, it always makes the materials transparent. Not sure why, and in some cases you might not even have materials. If that's the case, in the inspector under materials, just make sure that you're using external materials legacy. Click apply and it will actually create all of these folders for you, and in each of these folders you've got all of your texture maps and you've got one folder for all of your materials. Okay, and this is the issue with the materials. So go into the materials folder, click on the first material, and you will notice that the rendering mode is set to transparent. So what we're going to do is hold shift, click on the very last one and change the rendering mode from transparent to opaque. Okay, and that will basically fix the issue. So now when we go back to our characters, now we can see that they're all fine. We're going to drag one of the characters into the scene. I'm going to double click to get a little bit closer, and now I can hardly see this character. So I'm going to take my directional light and just rotate around until I can actually see the character. And I might actually just put in a new light just so I can see the character. You don't have to do this unless you can't see the character. Point light, okay, that's a little better. Great, okay, so now I can see the character. Just going to get rid of my gizmos for a second. Alright, so the character's in here but not looking too good. Now, the person who had the issue with this sorted it out himself, so that's great. But he actually chose a different shader, which you can do. I mean, you can click on the shaders and effectively choose any of these. Some of them won't work, obviously. Things like nature, UI, VR and stuff probably won't work with this character. You can go with mobile shaders if you want. These are obviously very, very fast shaders which will work with mobile phones and mobile devices. These are the standard and the standard specular, which are the PBR shaders, the physical base renderer shaders, okay, that have things like metallicity, albedo, reflections and that kind of thing. Or you can go with your legacy shaders. These are shaders that came packaged with Unity before Unity 5. Alright, so these are the really old shaders, but they will actually work perfectly fine. They're just not going to be as powerful. So what I'm going to do is show you how to set all of these materials up. Okay, so first of all, with the skin, we're going to click on body and we notice that we have our shader set up here. Okay, so first thing, with our albedo in here, we're going to change the color slightly. Okay, so I'm going to click color. Under the hexadecimal code, I'm going to type D9, D9, D9. Okay, so that just darkens his skin a little bit. Now under this metallic area, we're going to click on enemy 1 at look around. Okay, and we're going to find this, which is the enemy 1 body gloss import. Okay, so we're going to go back to the body and we're going to drag that one into the metallic. Okay, and instantly it goes crazy like this with the metallicity. And we need to change the smoothness to about 0.505. Okay, and instantly you'll notice that he gets a lot shinier. Okay, now I'm in a completely default scene, so I don't have the same lighting setup as in the flooded ground scene, so this might look a little bit different to the one that you're using. Okay, make sure you stay with metallic alpha for this, because if you change over to albedo, this is what happens. Not that much of a difference, but it's not using any data from there. Okay, and we definitely want the data to come from there. The normal map, we can leave this at 1. If you wanted it to be more exaggerated, you could go like 5 and he goes really extreme. Like 2 would be pretty extreme. If you went like 0.5, it starts to get rid of some of that normal. But I'm quite happy just to leave it at 1 for now. Okay, we need to uncheck reflections, since we don't want this to be acting like a sort of a mirror ball or something like that that's going to be reflecting his environment. Okay, so that is the skin setup. Now in terms of this beard, okay, it looks kind of weird, so I'll show you how to sort that out. So we're going to click on beards, and we're fine keeping this as standard. But what I'm going to do is find the material, the Enemy 1 beard, and I'm actually going to go with this one instead, this Enemy 1 beard opacity, okay, instead of that one. So I'm going to change the texture type from, oh no, before I do that, you change this alpha source. I don't want it from alpha, I want it from grayscale, and you'll see what this does once I change the texture type to a sprite 2D. Click apply and it gets rid of that black background. Okay, so now it's got full transparency. So now I'm going to click back on beards, I'm going to drag this into there, and now this looks like this. It looks kind of crazy until we change the rendering mode to either cutout, or we could go with fade, depends on which one you prefer the look of. I might just leave that cutout actually, and we're going to change the color of the beard. Alright, so I'm just going to type in an hexadecimal code, 2B1C13. Okay, and that's kind of like this dark brown. You can also add that to your swatches as well if you want. Okay, so that colour is added there in my swatch, so I can use it again for his hair. So now you can see that the beard is looking a little bit more realistic. Now if we go back to our beards again, and you can actually just change your alpha cutoff, so you can make it a thicker beard or a thinner beard. Now under the metallic, we're going to take this Enemy 1 beard, actually we're going to use this one, sorry, this gloss. So we're just going to drag that into the metallic, and the smoothness value we're going to change to about 0.2, okay, just to make it a little bit shiny. And once again, with a normal map, you can increase that or decrease that as you need to, and we don't need any reflections on this. Okay, so that's sorted out the beard. The hair is pretty much the same thing. Okay, so with the hair, let's find the material, and we can see here that we've got the Enemy 1 hair. So let's click on this one. Input is grayscale, texture type, sprite 2D. Let's click apply. Alright, and the background disappears. So now when I click on the hair, I'm going to drag this into that slot, change this from opaque to cutout, and I'm now going to choose that colour from my swatch, which is the same hexadecimal code. Okay, and now he's got brown hair. For the metallic, for the hair, I'm going to use this one. Just drag that in there, and the smoothness about 0.1 or 0.2, whichever one you want to go with. Okay, and finally just switch off the reflections. Okay, great. Now you will notice that, whoops, you do have these eyelashes. What I normally do with the eyelashes, I think that's default, is I normally switch those off, since they are not necessary inside of the game. If you did want to have your eyelashes on, I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we would need to create a new material. So we need to go into the materials folder, right click, choose create, and material. Let's call this eyelashes. And we're just going to click and drag that onto the eyelashes themselves. So now back to the default, and we're going to go back into our Enemy 1, and we're going to use this body. Okay, so into the default, we're going to drag this body into there. Okay, now what I want to do with this body is I want to use, oh sorry, it's this one rather. I want to change this, so I want to choose from grayscale and change this to sprite 2D and UI, and you'll see now that it's cut those out. So back to default again. I'm going to use that enemy one body image, drag it into there, and we're going to choose cut out, and obviously just change the color of this to something like black or something like that, so that now you can see that he's got the actual eyelashes. If I can get close enough, I don't think I can. Nope. Okay, but he has actually got them, but I normally switch them off. Okay, the eyes are not looking so good, so let's sort out the eyes. So let's click back on characters, back onto the materials, and we're going to right click, choose create and the new material, and let's just call these eyes. Okay, and we're going to click and drag that onto the actual eyes themselves. I'm going to go back to my characters and the enemy one, back to the eyes, and now I'm going to drag this enemy one body image into the albedo. Okay, so now we can see his eyes. They look a little unusual at the moment. Now we definitely want these to be quite shiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change from metallic alpha to albedo alpha, and I'm just going to drag the metallic up slightly just to make them a little bit darker and drag the smoothness down a little bit. So now we can see that they're getting pretty shiny, and what we want to do is obviously drag in this normal map as well into the normal. Okay, great. Now you can definitely see that point there. Yeah, that's pretty good value. We definitely want reflections and specular highlights left on. And in fact, what I like to do, because this is a relatively dark game, is to apply a little bit of emission. That basically means that they will begin to glow a little bit. So we're going to click the color, and I'm just going to tell you the RGB values. So it's 58 for all of them. So let's change this to 58. Now he's got red eyes. 58, 58. Okay, so they're a little bit brighter, and obviously the intensity stays at 0. Okay, so now his eyes are really starting to stand out, and he's looking like a much more professional character. Okay, great. So now for his clothes. So let's start with his hat. So everything's good on here except for the reflections. Let's take the reflections off. We need this metallic for the hat. So here is the hat, and we're going to use this gloss. We're just going to drag that in there, and the smoothness for the hat, we're going to set it to roughly about 0.3. Okay, so you can see it's got a little bit of smoothness to it, and bear in mind you can actually just change the color of this hat to whatever you want based on the color. I'm just going to drag mine down a little bit into the gray. Let's do the same with this top. So we need the metallic for the tops, which is just here. Smoothness, experiment with this, but I'm going to go with 0.3. And bear in mind, you probably do want metallic alpha as opposed to albedo alpha. Albedo alpha will make it way too shiny. And probably don't want any reflections coming off that. And obviously you can change the color of this. So I think on this one I actually made the top quite bright for the first character. You can just drag around on the colors, by the way. But for this character, the tops were 9, 3, 9, 3, 8, 0. Has that made a change? Wow, that's weird. Okay, yeah, I did make it a little bit brighter for this character. I thought it was much brighter actually. I'm wondering if let me just try this. Going with none. I may have very well taken the texture off that and just gone with the color, which obviously you can do. Okay, so you can just go with just the colour if you want, as opposed to the texture. The normal map is giving it all of the necessary details. 939380. Okay, and then obviously in the actual game that will start to sort of glow like you see in the videos. And then for the shorts, which are the bottoms, once again we need these the metallic for the shorts, so that's this second one. I'm going to drag this in here. Smoothness of about 0.3, and the colour for these is, I'll just type in the hexadecimal code, D 5D 9C1. Okay, and as you can see, there's not a great deal of change there, but for this one you do want to keep those that texture in there, I think. And then finally for the shoes, probably want these to be a bit darker, so I'm going to go with like a sort of a brownish type colour. And for the shoes we also need this gloss into the metallic there, and we're just going to drag this down until we've got a nice little bit of a shininess coming off there, and we probably don't want any reflections. I'll do that for the bottoms as well. Actually, we don't want any reflections off those. Great, so for the shoes that's pretty much all set up. Okay, so this is effectively the same as the prefabs that I gave you. That's how I sorted them out. So if your prefabs aren't working, that's how you get them working. And in terms of, I think it was enemy number 2 who has the glasses, so let me just put him in here. As you can see, enemy 2, he's been set up kind of based off enemy 1 there. I'm going to quickly show you how to sort out his glasses, which is eyewear. So I'm just going to get a little bit closer to the eyewear, and what we're going to do is click on the material. We're going to go to the enemy 2, and we're going to find this, which is the eyewear opacity import. We're going to change this from grayscale, and we're going to go sprite to the UI and apply that. So now that we've got the see-through element, and then to the eyewear, we're now going to drag that into the albedo, and we're going to change this to maybe not cut out. I think we want some kind of a fade. So now you can start to see that glass fading out there, and all we need to do is basically give it some kind of a colour. So let's say something like that, so that now he has his glasses set up inside of this. Okay, and in terms of his top, I think I made it purple, I think, in the game, so that's just tops. Just remove this by clicking on the target and choosing none, and then changing this to that sort of purplish type colour. Okay. Now what you may find, actually, I've just realised that each of these have their own material inside of here, so there's quite a lot of them. So you are going to have to go through each of those characters and set up the skin. However, the eyes materials, you can reuse those for multiple characters, and in fact for this enemy 2, let's just take a look. If I go to body and in fact, let me click on materials, right, and I go to enemy 1 body, if I now click that in there, notice how that updates for enemy 2. So that will save you having to go through all of these materials and setting them all up in that way. That pretty much is only really for body, or if they're sharing the same kind of shoes, you can do that. I think they're different. Are they different shoes, are they? No, they look the same, so you could probably share the materials there, etc. Anything that's going to be different, like this top is a different colour, then they need to be two separate materials. Now the eyelashes for each of the characters, you can just switch those off. But you may notice that these characters are relatively small. Okay, so if I just click on enemy 1, the reason why is basically the scale. So the way that they come in from Mixamo is at a standard scale of about 1. The Flooded Grounds was made slightly larger than the standard scale, so that's why these characters appear kind of small in relation to their surroundings. So whenever you got a case like that, you just have to readjust your scale. As long as you're clicking on the main prefab at the top, whatever is attached to this, in other words whatever is inside of it, when you click this little triangle, will actually take on the parent scale. Okay, so everything will readjust to that scale, and obviously it's roughly about 1.6 in each direction, and obviously you can see how large that character is now in relation to the other character, so he's much bigger. And in fact, if you didn't want him as tall, I think in my game I actually changed the Y values for some of the characters just so that they were at slightly different heights. You can experiment with things like 1.3, 1.4, probably 1.4 is about as low as I go actually, 1.4, 1.5, and maybe even go as high as 1.7. Okay, obviously in that case what you're doing is you're actually stretching the scale to give them slightly different features. You can obviously put a float value, so 1.65, something like that, so slightly taller, or just keep it standard 1.6 all the way. If you wanted to make him slightly broader, instead of 1.6 you could go like 1.8, and then obviously it becomes a little more wider in that kind of way. So experiment until you get something that you're happy with for your game. Okay, and whenever you're happy with these, because obviously we don't have the prefabs at the moment, we can just right click on here inside of the HorrorFuse characters folder, click create, new folder, and let's just call this prefabs. And now it's just a case of taking this enemy 1, clicking and dragging, and we can either have a prefab variant or an original prefab. I'm going to keep this as an original prefab so that it's not reliant on any previous models. Okay, and there we go, and then we got our prefab, so we can now, for example, delete this character out and just drag a new one back in. Now at first it looks like maybe he's gone small again, but he hasn't. He's just really far away. So when he comes close again, obviously it's quite big in relation to this character. Okay, so hopefully that helps you if you can't get the prefabs working. If you do have any questions or need any further help, just get in touch and I'll be quite happy to help.